I'm not a particularly brave person, but when I'm pursuing something, the issue of fear drops away. It's not in the menu of feelings that I normally would have when I'm focused to make my art. There's my own history out here, which is certainly paramount. And as a child, I think I've been coming out here since I was 5. And I have very vivid memories of the ocean, being spellbound, being petrified, braving the waves, and my own fear of going into them. Some people have suggested, and it may be a reasonable, surmise, that there's a certain vengeance in what I'm doing, in the sense that I am freezing and controlling the waves, the ocean that petrified me as a child. You use the word courageous. Only if I see a picture of myself does it strike me that I might be courageous or that I might have been struck with fear, because I'm totally concentrating like a fisherman on reeling in the fish. So whatever else is going around, it's of no consequence to me. When I'm shooting, it's a very specific job, and in a certain sense, it looks very romantic, and it certainly feels romantic in some ways, but my consciousness is not tied to the romance. My subconscious is tied to the romance. My digital waves came into being from my inhaling the ocean and staring at the ocean. But ultimately, with the help of an extraordinary 1 or 2 people, I created my own ocean in a computer in a completely fictitious manner. It's my fiction. We sort of broke apart the existing software and altered it to suit my needs. We had to move 3.2 million particles in 3 dimensions. And those individual particles are what you are seeing move. And each of those particles is assigned a specific LED. One of the things for me about these waves is I needed to have the technology I was using be used as paint is used. So the digital waves, in fact, are not me with a movie camera or a video camera. It's me with very talented 1 or 2 people near me, spending several years building my own waves. And in that computer space, we can light it, we can suspend gravity, we can speed it up and slow it down. The experience of the parish, I think, was an enormously effective stage. If you think of the side of the parish, and I often do, I love architecture. And the first thing that struck me is that in a way it was a stage, or potentially even a canvas, that I could address. 2 videos that were repeating on 2 50-foot long horizontal walls that were 9 feet high. But the context of that I was working from was not just those walls, but that building, the potentials of sky, the changing light of day to night, as well as the field going up to it. The 2 waves which were repeating on the side of the parish were essentially a bird's eye view looking down onto a breaking ocean. So I've taken what is flat ocean and flipped it up onto the side of a building. I'm summoning architecture, a field, an existing sky with my memory that's being pulled from the sea. So it's a very nice bouillabaisse. No video was shot to make that artwork.
I'm somebody who doesn't actually like to live on the ocean. People who get inspired by that distant horizon line freak me out, because to me it's an existential reminder. I look out there and all I see is where I can't exist, right? What I like is to live by the ocean, by the water, which is what I did when I grew up in Port Washington, where I have water and then I have something on the other side of the water that's also inhabited in some way. And I find I possess the whole environment differently because of that. And so Sag Harbor had that quality to it. It's water, it's bays, it's ponds and streams and stuff. And also, like Port Washington, it's a dead-end town. And somehow, to me, the dead-end town is the most complete town. It's not a passing through town, it's a stopping at town, which I like a lot.
I have done some paintings from this environment, particularly since we've lived here in this house. There have been a number of paintings that were directly inspired by the general environment around here, and also the woods out back behind our house, which is a very complex subject matter, it turns out. In fact, when we first bought this property, I was not happy that it was in the woods, because the woods per se are not my favorite visual environment. I find it too chaotic, too complex. And only in the last, I would say 10 years or so, I've started to be able to kind of sort out what I'm seeing when I'm looking at the woods. I think it's a very mysterious and kind of amazing place, actually. People who do plein air painting amaze, fascinate, and impress me, and I'm not really one of them. There seems to be a necessary processing that I have to do after I've looked at a scene or a place in order to make it feel familiar to me in the way that it did when it inspired me to try to paint it.
I do remember the moon on that, even though Sandy was I was expecting Sandy to be, huge. And I had this weird response to storms, and I think a lot of people have this, which is you want it to be huge, and you don't care if it's destructive. It's a little bit of my drama thing. So when Sandy came, and it was like the water only came up part the way up the lawn, I was like, shit. What a letdown. I'm so sorry, because that's not the proper response, but I always like a big storm, and I like enough of a threat to create, fun. I don't know if I could have grown my work if I'd stayed in the city. I say that I only came here because of Brian, but I gotta say, being here is an artist's fantasy. You can't, it's hard to do art without space. And at first I worked in my bathroom in the city. That was lame. And it generated a certain kind of work. And even though my nature work is like fantasy upon fantasy upon fantasy upon reference, back to fantasy, back to reference, it's not very connected to, the bunny that I ran into or the hawks even. It's still the vibrational soup of being in nature is a totally feeds into art totally differently than an urban life does.